Hello, it is yet again podcast time. Welcome to You Have My Sword, and I gotta come clean, y'all. The earth is flat, and I'm a believer. Or at least it was flat. It's complicated. Let's talk about it. So here's the thing. Middle Earth is flat. Like flat as fuck. But then it got unflat. Much like me, but I went to a plastic surgeon in Queens for that. Middle Earth unflattened itself out of sheer spite. Before we jump into it, let's talk about Middle Earth's creator for a second, Eru Iluvatar. Iluvatar is introduced in the Silmarillion as the supreme being of the universe, the creator of all existence. In Tolkien's invented Elvish language, Quenya, Eru means the one, or he that is alone, and Iluvatar means all-father. The name appears in Tolkien's work both in isolation and paired, so either just Eru or just Iluvatar, or Eru Iluvatar altogether. I like Iluvatar personally, so we'll run with that. Iluvatar first created a group of angelic beings called in Elvish the Ainur, and these were co-actors in the creation of the universe through a holy music and chanting called the Music of the Ainur. Iluvatar alone could create independent life or reality by giving something called the flame imperishable. All beings not created directly by Iluvatar, such as dwarves, ents, eagles, etc., still needed to be accepted by Iluvatar to become more than simple puppets of their creator. So, when Melkor, who had originally been Iluvatar's most powerful servant, desired the flame imperishable, he long sought after it in vain. A tale as old as time, am I right? Nobody can just be happy with the godlike powers they've been given. They always need more. I blame capitalism. So Gandalf actually mentions this secret fire when he goes 1v1 with the Balrog on the bridge of Khazad-dûm in the Mines of Moria. Gandalf says, "I am a servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame of Anor. You cannot pass. The dark fire will not avail you. Flame of Udun. Go back to the shadow. You cannot pass." And the Balrog did not read the room. Anyways, so that's a little context on who created everything, and let's talk about why the fuck anybody would make an earth flat, but more importantly, how fucking annoying men are that God himself flipped the script on the entire planet. So, if you listened to the last episode, you probably learned a little something about the Númenóreans, and namely how Sauron tried to trick men into sailing over to Aman with the promise of immortality once they set foot onto the Undying Lands. And because men are greedy little fucks, they did. So, Iluvatar fucking hated everything about this, so he absolutely buried King Ar-Pharazôn, the 25th and final king of Númenor, and his army when they landed at Aman trying to reach the Undying Lands, which, as we know, they wrongly assumed would give them immortality. Iluvatar's retaliation caused the earth to take a spherical shape, drowning Númenor in its entirety, wiping out an entire nation of men, and caused the Undying Lands to be taken outside the spheres of earth. Logistically, I'm not sure how this makes a ton of sense, so let's talk about the cosmology of Arda. Actually, before we jump into flat earth cosmology, can we talk about this one flat earth documentary? Do you guys know the one with like that hot flat earth MILF and the insane flat earth convention where people brought their fucking children to brainwash them into thinking the earth is flat? It's called, I believe, Behind the Curve, and I do believe it's on Netflix, and it's honestly funnier than it probably should be. Listen, I'm not here to ridicule a group of stupid people despite absolutely sounding like I am, but the entire documentary leads up to this experiment by flat earthers themselves, and it's supposed to prove the earth is flat. And spoiler alert, y'all, a bunch of flat earthers debunk their own shit right before your very eyes at the end of this documentary. It's also worth noting I did mushrooms for the first time while I watched it. Anyways, I highly suggest y'all watch it for a laugh. Okay, anyways, let's talk flat Middle Earth now. So, Iluvatar created Arda, which is just another name for Earth. The disk-like Arda has continents and seas, and the moon and the stars revolve around it. Arda was created to be the habitation for the children of Iluvatar, which at the time was elves and men. This world was, at first, not lit by a sun. Instead, the Valar created 2 lamps to illuminate it. Iluin, which means sky blue, and Ormal, which means high gold. To support the lamps, the Vala forged 2 enormous pillars of rock, Helkar in the north of the continent Middle-earth and Ringel in the south. Iluin was set upon Helkar and Ormal upon Ringel. Between the columns where the light of the 2 lamps mingled, the Valar lived on the island of Almaren, in the middle of a great lake. So, at some point, Melkor destroyed the lamps, and when he did, the fallout from that was cataclysmic, changing continents and causing flooding. Because of this, 2 vast inland seas, Helkar and Ringel, and 2 major seas, Belegaer and the Eastern Sea, were created. But the island of Almaren, where the Valar first lived, and its lake were ultimately destroyed. So, the Valar left Middle-earth and went to the newly formed continent of Aman in the west, where they created their new home called Valinor. To discourage Melkor from also fucking up Aman, they thrust the continent of Middle-earth to the east, thus widening the ocean of Belegaer at its middle, and raising 5 major mountain ranges in Middle-earth: the Blue, Red, Gray, and Yellow Mountains, as well as the Mountains of the Wind. This act disrupted the symmetrical shapes of the continents and seas, the Valar stepping up their fucking earthbending game in a big way. So, Christopher Tolkien has noted that the story of the lamps in its early stage was very different from the story that was then published in the Silmarillion. According to older writings not used in the published version of the Silmarillion, the Valar wanted peace with Melkor and decided to ask his assistance. They wished to fix the lamps upon Arda's ground. Melkor, black with hate and envy of the rest of the Valar, he agreed to help. He gave one of the Vala, called Aule, best known for creating the dwarves, a substance which was both sturdy and strong. It was ice, which at the time was unknown to the Valar. The Valar placed the lamps atop these pillars of ice. Melkor bided his time and allowed the Valar to do as they wished until the fateful day when the lamps' light and heat melted the ice, and the lamps crashed upon Arda, flooding it with water and darkness. Truly a TikTok-level prank for the ages. The one remaining influence from the older version of the story was the fall of the towers created inland seas, a vestige of notion that the towers had been made of ice that melted. In Tolkien's latest writings, where Arda was a round world from its beginning, the 2 lamps never truly existed and were instead a subject of Númenórean mythology. Climate change, anyone? Hello? Whenever someone wants to talk shit about how the polar ice caps aren't melting, tell them about Flat Earth Arda's lamps. I promise you won't sound crazy. Tolkien's Legendarium also addresses a fun theory that Tolkien played around with that has to do with our own modern-day Atlantis, like the underwater city, not the resort and casino. For context, since a lot of people don't seem to know this, which I honestly didn't know for a long time, but Tolkien envisioned Arda as our own Earth, since when he started writing the contents and characters for Middle-earth, it all stemmed from him wanting to give England its own mythology. So the events we're familiar with from the first through third ages would take place in the super far distant past of our own Earth. Current day would probably be around the 7th age, where all other races were wiped out but man, which, how the fuck, right? Just classic men feeling upwards. Anyways, so insane lengths of time go by, races and creatures slowly disappear and continents shift, much like Pangea. Tolkien's unfinished The Lost Road tales suggest a sketch of the idea of historical continuity connecting the Elvish mythology of the First Age with the classical Atlantis myth, presenting the Atlantis legend as a sort of confused account of the story of Numenor, if that makes sense. The cataclysmic reshaping of the world would have left its imprint on the cultural memory and collective unconscious of humanity, and even on the genetic memory of individuals. The Atlantis part of the Legendarium explores the theme of the memory of a straight road into the West, which now only exists in memory or myth because the physical world has been changed. The Numenorians who survived the catastrophe sailed as far west as they could in search of their ancient home, but their travels only brought them back around the world to their starting point. So before the end of the Second Age, the transition from flat Earth to round Earth had been completed. It is pretty neat to consider us living in the future with these fantastical events so far in the past, that our modern day Atlantis myth is actually the sunken island of Numenor. I think that's really fun, and I'd have loved to see Tolkien go further with these kinds of parallels, but my mans was busy.
Please leave a message after the tone.
Well, I think that's about it for Flat Middle-earth. As always, I hope you learned something, and if not, what's it like being God's favorite? Your homework is to check out some pre and post Flat Middle-earth maps online. It is really fucking cool to see logistically how it all looked and how it changed. So definitely look up some of these maps. I find it really interesting to see what Flat Middle-earth looked like as opposed to Middle-earth as we know it as a sphere. As always, I'd like to shout out another Tolkien-inspired creator. In this episode is a YouTube channel called Nerd of the Rings. They make great videos, both historical and a lot of what-if videos, which are really fun. And watching their videos has helped me buff my overall knowledge base for sure. As always, please check out youhavemyswordpodcast.com for links to our socials and Patreon. If you sub to Patreon, you get access to Discord, where we can talk about anything you want. Literally, yes, anything, no rules. Thanks for listening, and as always, you have my sword.
Edgeworks Nebula.